Take your Bibles tonight, turn to John chapter number 7. We switched things up and we're in the book of John tonight. John chapter number 7, and this is number 21. Number 21 in our sermon series through the book of John. We'll be back at it in a couple of weeks though. So next week we'll be doing something different out of Isaiah, I think, is what if the Lord directs me elsewhere. But Isaiah is where we're going to be with the Shalom men when they're here, and looking forward to having them. But John here, John chapter number 7. For the next couple of weeks, next Sunday night, I'm going to preach out of the Old Testament with the Day of Atonement and how that ties in for next Sunday night. And then 2 weeks' time, I'm going to start a new sort of mini-series like we did before with missions, and the guys are going to preach through as well. We're going to preach on the topic of sin in the life of a believer. Sin in the life of the believer, however that may be presented. But I don't know about you, but I struggle with it still as well. Can you believe that? Are you answering for yourself or for me? Hang on a second there, if you could. That's a loaded question, wasn't it? Don't ask my wife. Unless, of course, I get right of reply. But we're going to deal with that. And Paul says it, man, that passage in Romans stands out, doesn't it? Can't you just see the frustration in his life? Like, oh, wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from this body of death? Because he says, man, as long as we're at home in this body, sin is going to be an issue. You might be forgiven, and we might stand before God righteous because of Jesus Christ, but we're going to struggle every day. And the passions of this life and the passions of this body are still there. So we're going to look at that subject. I'm going to preach the bookends again. I'll start it off, and then the men are going to preach on that subject, and then I'll finish it as well after a few weeks. But on that particular subject. Anyway, I'll do this as well. Put this into your little thought. I'll ask this Sunday nights, a little bit more casual of sorts, not quite Wednesday nights, but it's not a Sunday morning where I normally wouldn't do this on a Sunday morning. But I want to ask you a question and get feedback tonight. What is the most derision or the most mocking or the most ridicule that you've received for being a Christian? Think of that. Think of a situation. I don't know what it is. I'm throwing it on you. I have a feeling that we're not going to go very deep tonight with that because of where we live. But just have that thought locked away. John chapter 7. I was going to read the first 9 verses here. Follow along as I read here. It says, "After these things, Jesus walked in Galilee, for he would not walk in Jewry, because the Jews sought to kill him. Now the Jews' feast of tabernacles was at hand. His brethren therefore said unto him, Depart hence and go into Judea, the disciples also, that thy disciples also may see the works which thou doest. For there is no man that doeth anything in secret, and he himself seeketh to be known openly. If thou do these things, show thyself to the world. For neither did his brethren believe in him. Then Jesus said unto them, My time is not yet come, but your time is always ready. The world hateth you. The world cannot hate you, but me it hateth, because I testify of it, that the works thereof are evil. Go ye up unto this feast. I go not up yet unto this feast, for my time is not yet full come. And when he had said these words unto them, he abode still at Galilee." Well, verse 10 says, "But when his brethren were gone up, then went he also up unto the feast, not openly, but as it were in secret. And then the Jews sought him at the feast and said, Where is he?" So we have this part here in John chapter 7 where his life, they want to kill Jesus for doing miracles of all things. Isn't that a strange thing? But they wanted to kill him. And when it says Jewry, it has to do with Judea. It has to do with the lower part of Israel. So he spent most of his time being from Nazareth and being up around the northern part in the Sea of Galilee. And now to go to the feast down in Jerusalem, that he didn't want to go there at that particular time because they sought to kill him and his time wasn't yet come. In fact, if you read through the book of John, you'll find that John focuses on the feasts. He starts with a Passover, then there's another Passover, and then there's another Passover. And now we are beyond the Passovers, and we're now at the Feast of Tabernacles, which the Feast of Tabernacles takes place right around, in fact, it might be this week coming up. It's just how it's coincidentally worked out. But the Feast of Tabernacles is this week in the Jewish calendar. It is also 6 months out from the Passover. So we will look at this again next week because of studying the Day of Atonement, which is also around this time of year. So now it's 6 months. Then you'll find that he is then at the Feast of Lights, which has to do which is winter time, which has to do with the dedication of the temple. If you read, which is out of the Maccabees, when the Judas Maccabeus cleansed the temple and the light, and the Jews would, Hanukkah is the word I'm trying to find. Hanukkah is celebrated. Well, that's the Feast of Lights. And Jesus is found there at the temple at the Feast of Lights, which is then 3 months. It's almost like John is doing a countdown. 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, 6 months, 3 months, countdown to the passion of Christ, to his death, to the time that he is betrayed by Judas. And much of the Gospel of John is centered around that week. So he flies through. It's almost like every chapter has fast forwarded 1 year in the how John lays out it. And then you get to just a few chapters, and you're all of a sudden at the week leading up to his death. And much of the book of John is centered around the death of Jesus Christ in the discourses and the Olivet Discourse and the things that we are coming to. But this particular feast is there. Now, I ask you this question, and I'll ask it now as an open-sourced floor question. What is the most ridicule you may have received from being a Christian? Is there someone that can think of a time? I'm just curious about this. I know no one's lost their head. I know John the Baptist lost his head for where he stood. Josh?
Probably just being in the city, handing out gospel tracts and trying to share the gospel.
Well, you had that person 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Wanted to.
Blue first and then came to me, but I think people being angry not actually at me, because like Jesus says they're angry at him, but I'd say that's probably the most that I've had in my Christian life.
Yeah, it's just simply at a gospel tract. Yeah.
Being slammed in the face.
Yeah, I knocked on someone's door in Wundowie, which reminds me of that. And I'll tell you, it was some guy was like, "Yeah, I'm coming." I was like, "Okay." I was just standing there, and we were doing for our Sunday school bus. And I knocked on the door, and I stood back, and I waited, and it was about a few minutes went by, and then he comes and opens the door, and he looks at me. I don't know what I was wearing that day, or if I didn't take a shower or something, because I barely got anything out of my mouth. And he was like, "Oh, blankety blank," slammed the door. "Good day to you too, sir." That was, as soon as he saw that, I thought I was a Christian about that, and that's a heated response. But yeah, sometimes you do get responses like that, and I like how you put that. It's not directed at you, because they don't know you and they don't know me. It's a venting of God. You're a representative of God. Blah. And it's definitely you can see those responses. Anybody else have just quickly? I just thought I'd open this up real quick.
One day seems to be a hotbed of volatility. We've often shared the gospel up there and had a similar response. Probably not as much as Roy. Roy was physically carried off the property one day, so God physically picked him up and carried him to the door, to the gates that don't come back. So we're sitting there.
That also might be Roy. It's try to, but,
Look, it's one day. We had many 45 years ago, I suppose. We did a concerted campaign up there. Campaign's probably the wrong word. We did a concerted effort to spread the gospel into a mining type town. So it's this Filipino guy coming down on Wednesday. It's a tough town.
yeah, Newman.
Yeah, tough town. We had a film night up there, and we just kept getting rocks thrown, all sorts of stuff. So it was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
We didn't get ice cream, but
Oh, that movie. No popcorn, huh? Cole, just real quick. I'll just do these two and move on.
Similar to Josh, obviously, just getting they look at you with such hatred and such just, you know, it's just like they have this preconceived idea of who you are and what you're representing, and there's this anger and this hatred towards the name of Jesus, or even to do with maybe they associate with religion, and you know, there's numerous different reasons. But yeah, I had a few times in the city where like it was actually like full on threatening, like a person about to attack, you know, in a situation. I actually had one guy hit me before, but it wasn't that bad. Like, he didn't hit me in the face or anything, but he hit me in the arm, and immediately my sense of like, oh, I need to hit this guy back, kicked him, and then it was like God was like, whoa. This is about me, like, you know. And I walked away from that, and in a silly little way, I thought about that verse in Acts where the apostles said that they, you know, when they were beaten, where they said like they counted it joy, like they're rejoicing that they were worthy to be beaten. But in another side of things, like just experiencing it from my friends when I first got saved, that's where I really felt hurt the most. Like it's anything about it, I get randomers telling me on media all the time. I got that before I was saved. But hearing it from people that you taught with your friends and people that you loved and respected or whatever and spent time with, hearing just them saying nasty things about you, and when you're trying to tell them the truth and you love them and you care about them, that's probably where I would say I felt hurt the most when I first got saved.
Interesting you say that, because that's where I was going. I was interested to see if someone would say that. Yeah. Ken, real quick, were you going to say?
Yeah, Joshua ended up pretty well, but I don't mind saying on a domestic level, it can be quite the opposite when you are not spoken to, or you're outcast basically from your own wife or family. So that is another. Nothing needs to be said, and you know that by the grace of God you are there, and you think that you're a testimony. You keep praying day in day out, 2-3 times a day, and you stay steadfast. That can be as much as getting hit or something said to, when you're not being communicated to.
Yeah.
By the people that are closest to you. That can also, you can see a scar, but you can't see a heart.
Yeah. No, that's true. Well, that's where I'm going to go tonight, because look what Jesus is facing here. His brethren, in verse 3, he says, his brethren therefore said unto him, depart hence and go into Judea. Now those brethren, it's his brothers. You see that before about the brothers of Jesus. We mentioned this last week, I think it was, that the Catholics teach that Mary was a virgin and a perpetual virgin. She got married to Joseph. She had Jesus, and she was the Virgin Mary. She was conceived of the Holy Ghost, but she was not a perpetual virgin. She got married, and she knew not her husband until she had brought forth her firstborn son and laid him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger, Matthew tells us. Then she has a married relationship with Joseph. There were children born unto Mary and Joseph. You find that. And it says, is this not the carpenter's son? That's what they're saying. Isn't this Jesus? This is the guy we grew up with. They grew up with Jesus in Nazareth. He was the carpenter's son. They knew Mary. And is it not James and John and his brothers? They knew his brothers are named, and his sisters. So he has family relations that are in Mary and Joseph's family. So he grew up with them. So when he says his brethren therefore said unto him, depart hence and go into Judea, they're talking about his brothers that grew up in the same household. James is one of those that are mentioned. Paul says in Galatians that when he goes up to Jerusalem, he goes and sees the Lord's brother, James, which James then becomes the pastor at the church at Jerusalem because they go up and see James. Now, it's not the Apostle James, as in James the son of thunder, the brother of John, James and John, because that James lost his head in Acts chapter number 8, I think, and it's in Acts 15 that they go up to see James. It's James the Lord's brother. But as much as you think, oh yeah, well they would have grown up and he would have just acknowledged that Jesus was the Messiah from the very get-go. But that was not true. It says here in the passage in verse number 5, for neither did his brethren believe him. Now, if Ben, wherever he's out there, if Ben and Zach grew up, can you just imagine this? So here is Zach and Ben's out there. He's the younger sibling. And Zach grows up, and then Zach, hypothetically, is Jesus. Very, very hypothetically. And he is Jesus. And all of a sudden, at age 30, he now all of a sudden is known for doing miracles. And all of Perth and all of the surrounding areas are coming and following, coming to hear what Zach has to say. And Ben, his little brother, is looking at him going, can I have a bike? No, I don't know if that's maybe. But could you imagine Ben looking at Zach going, wait a second, you're supposed to be the Christ? You are him? You're saying you're Christ? We know this is 3 years now, maybe 2.5, 3 years of his earthly ministry. So they know what Jesus has been saying. They know what his disciples are saying, that thou art the Christ. They've probably met Peter, and Peter, as open with his mouth as any man is, and he just blurts it out, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. And they're looking at Jesus like, you, our brother, who we shared a room with, who we worked in Dad's carpentry shop together, fixing tables for the little Miss Bessie, you? And they mocked, and they kind of laughed, and they kind of derided Jesus. And it is often, when I think of times that I have been derided, that I've been mocked, that I've been ridiculed, I think the one of the prime times I remember, the first time, I was about Zach's age. I was about 12. I may have been 10, 11 or 12, and it occurred on Munro Street in Mount Helena. Now, Munro Street didn't exist in those days when I was a kid growing up in this area. It was just a vacant lot. It's been subdivided now and multiple houses are there. But there was a tree that was all hollow at the bottom, and the local kids used to ride our bikes. We used to hang out there, and I was with some kids in the area, and we were down at the tree. And they saw me, and they knew which school I went to and which church my family went to. And being 11-year-olds, they just thought it was fun to poke fun at the Christian guy that they knew. And this is what they said. They said, oh, you're a Bible basher. You're a Bible basher. You and all of them are Bible bashers. I don't even know, to this day, I don't know what a Bible basher is. Like, he's bashing people over here with the Bible. I guess that's what they mean, like giving people the scriptures. But he was calling me a Bible basher. And I remember thinking, I'm a Bible basher? What? No, I'm your friend. I don't know what it was like. But anyway, even as an 11-year-old, these kids that I didn't really know very well are saying, they're pointing me out as being different for no other reason than, man, I went to church. They didn't. And I went to a Christian school and they didn't. And that to them was enough to make it. Now that's a pretty, I don't have too much other than that. When I went on the project and was discussing the matters there on the project and on the radio, on 6PR and things like that, there was some feedback, and there was one email that I remember, and I tried quickly, I just remembered I went to go look at it, and there was one email that was pretty pointed and pretty scathing in what it said, and then it was signed off like, I can't remember his name, but it was like Meathead or Jughead, or it was some, I remember thinking like, I can't take this seriously now with the way you signed this off. But there have been times when you get great heat for standing on the principles of the Word of God. I know when we had the gay marriage vote, or the whatever it was vote, same-sex marriage vote, that I posted on our Facebook page and used it and said why I'm against, why I'll be voting no on the same-sex marriage. Man, you should have seen the comments that came flooding in on those times. Man, they just jumped all over that. And I don't know if they even read the article, took the time to read why. It's just like, man, they're jumping on that particular time just for standing for biblical values. But and it's when it comes from outside and from different people and that you don't know, yeah, you can bear with it. Some guy slamming my door in my face that he doesn't know me and I don't know him. I don't take offense at that. I don't really care, to be honest. And the same thing with Josh giving someone a gospel tract in the city to a random stranger who wants to punch his head off his shoulders. It's like, dude, like, we don't know each other. You don't even know me. Like, what is going on here? Like, you can move on. You don't live with it. But as Ken said, well, what if it's within your own house? What if it is a brother? What if it is a sister? What if it is a mother or a father? I don't know that. I grew up in a Christian home. But my mother, to a degree, knows that. And many of you in here know that here you are trying to serve God, and now your brother and your sister or your mother or your father or maybe even your children are going, well, hang on a second. And they're just kind of saying to you, because they're kind of mocking here is what I get from this passage, the brothers, because they say in verse 4, for there is no man that doeth anything in secret. So they're saying this, go down to Judah, go down to Jerusalem, go down to where everybody is. And then why don't you do some miracles down there and let everyone see? Because no one really is trying to be doing great things and they want to keep it secret. And they surely want to be known. And they're saying, why don't you go and be known? And they say in verse 4, for there is no man that doeth anything in secret, and he himself seeketh to be known openly. He says, if thou do these things, which things is he talking about? The miracles. If you really are giving sight to the blind, if you really are giving hearing to the deaf, and if you really are raising the cripples, and if you really are turning water into wine, if you really are doing these things, why don't you go and do it where everybody is and prove who you really are? That's kind of the tone that they're presenting to Jesus. If thou do these things, show thyself to the world. The very next verse tells us that for neither did his brethren believe in him. They took him as a kook. They said, nah, he's not really who he says he is at this particular time in their life. Now you will find that in the upper room after the resurrection, you know who you find in that upper room? Mary, the mother of Jesus, and his brethren. The resurrection changed their opinion of Jesus. And just like Saul became the Apostle Paul and did an amazing 180, James also does an amazing 180 where he goes from mocking and to ridiculing to actually believing. And God does a work in this unbelieving life to turn him around. And those people that mock the family members, the brother, the sister, the mother, the father, whoever it might be, know this, Jesus knows what you're facing. Jesus has experienced the mocking, the derision of close loved ones simply because of who he is and who he said he was. And they mocked him for it. But know this also, there was hope. They weren't write-offs. Man, they changed and they believed later on. And they became believers in Jesus as well. Let me show you two quick things to finish things off tonight. Go to Jeremiah. Jeremiah chapter number 20. Jeremiah chapter number 20. Backwards into the Old Testament. Jeremiah chapter number 20. Can you imagine being Jeremiah? I try and place myself into these stories. Here is Jeremiah, a prophet of God, standing up in a very wealthy, rich society where everything is peaceful, everything is prosperous, everything is going good. And Jeremiah stands up and says, God has given me a word and things are going to go very, very bad very, very soon. Well, that wasn't really what people wanted to hear. They said, no, we want to hear how God is going to prosper us. We want to hear how God is going to bring peace. We want to hear how God is going to bless our borders and increase us, which is what everyone wants to hear today. Everyone wants to go to church. Everyone wants to turn on their TV and hear some guy saying, God is for you. They all want to hear, God is against sinners and his long suffering does run out and you will meet with a holy God sooner than you may ever realize. No one wants to hear that. Everyone wants to hear prosperity on into the future. But Jeremiah stood up and said, God's long-suffering and His mercy is coming to an end, and judgment is coming upon your wicked nation. And he stood up and said, this temple is going to be destroyed. And he stood for the things of God in a wicked and perverse generation that really had a semblance of religion, but really on the inward side was corrupt. And look at this. He says, now Pashur, the son of Immer, verse 20, the priest, who was also chief governor in the house of the Lord, heard that Jeremiah prophesied these things against the temple. The temple is going to be destroyed. Verse 2 says, then Pashur smote Jeremiah the prophet and put him in the stocks that were in the high gate of Benjamin, which was by the house of the Lord. And it came to pass on the morrow that Pashur brought forth Jeremiah out of the stocks. Why on earth is he in stocks? For no other reason than saying, thus saith the Lord. Man, that's crazy to think. I've been listening to Pilgrim's Progress. I like to do. I tried last year, I'm trying this year to get a series on a Sunday night for Pilgrim's Progress for us to have a study through of what John Bunyan did. But John Bunyan wrote that from prison for doing no other reason than saying, we're going to assemble as a church. And he was thrown into prison for it and spent a period of time in prison and wrote a Pilgrim's Progress from prison. He was in the stocks. Here is Jeremiah in the stocks. Verse 3 says, it came to pass on the morrow that Pashur brought forth Jeremiah out of the stocks. Then said Jeremiah unto him, the Lord hath not called thy name Pashur, but Maga-Missabib. That just simply means fear all around. It's the Hebrew word untranslated, but it means fear on every side. So here is Pashur, which means peace, and it means like contentment. He says, right, your name is not going to be Pashur, it's going to be fear on every side. Because you delight in peace, but God is not bringing you peace. He's going to send you into captivity. Well, verse 4 says, for thus saith the Lord, behold, I will make thee a terror to thyself, fear, and to all thy friends, and they shall fall by the sword, and their enemies, and thine eyes shall behold it. And I will give all Judah into thy hand of the king of Babylon, and he shall carry them captive into Babylon, and shall slay them with the sword. This is the message of Jeremiah. Isn't this just a God loves you? He's for you. He wants to bless you. That's not what Jeremiah said. Verse 5 says, moreover, I will deliver all the strength of this city, and all the labours thereof, and all the precious things thereof, and all the treasures of the kings of Judah will I give into the hand of their enemies, and they shall spoil them and take them and carry them to Babylon. You think, man, go Jeremiah. He's standing up for the things of God. Bold here. And if you know Jeremiah, he was not an Elijah. He was not a John the Baptist. He was not a person who just delighted in the presence of people. He was, personality-wise, he was quite tender of heart. He wept. The book of Lamentations is written by Jeremiah. He's known as the weeping prophet. Michelangelo, depicting Jeremiah, has him as the weeping with his hands on his head, in his lap, in the Sistine Chapel to depict Jeremiah, which probably more accurately says he's a tender-hearted individual, but he's standing boldly for God here. Verse 6 says, and thou, Pashur, and all that dwell in thine house shall go into captivity, and thou shalt come to Babylon, and thou shalt die, and shalt be buried there, thou and all thy friends to whom thou hast prophesied. And then look at verse 7. Here's this mighty Jeremiah. How did this go for him? O Lord, thou hast deceived me, and I was deceived. Thou art stronger than I, and hast prevailed. I am in derision daily. That's that being mocked at, laughed to scorn. I mean, here is he standing for God, and Jeremiah is being mocked, and he is being laughed at for what he stands for and what he believes. And he says, I'm in derision. Everyone mocketh me. That Jeremiah, he's the crazy guy who says God is going to judge us. For since I spake, I cried out, I cried violence and spoil, because the word of the Lord was made a reproach unto me and a derision daily. Then I said, I will not make mention of him, nor speak any more in his name. But his word was in mine heart as a burning fire shut up in my bones. And I was weary with forbearing, and I could not stay. He says, man, I got to a place where it's like this emotional roller coaster is Jeremiah. Is that he was bold for God, and then he got lots of mocking and ridiculing when he stood up for God, and then he cowers and he's shivering again, thinking, oh man, trying to find the shadow and some wall to hide behind. And he says, I'm not strong here. God, I feel mocked, and this mocking is taking place into my very heart, and I feel weak and I'm shy, and I don't want to ever speak for you ever again. You ever felt like that? You think, man, I don't want to take the mocking at work, and I don't want to take the mocking in my family, and I don't want to take the mocking anymore, so I'm just not going to say anything. That's how Jeremiah felt. To my friends, he says, I know what that feels like to be in derision. For I heard the defaming on many, it says on verse 10, for I heard the defaming of many, fear on every side. You think, and then he gets better, and you go down in verse 13. He says, sing unto the Lord, praise ye the Lord, for he hath delivered the soul of the poor from the hand of the evildoer. It's this cycle, and he goes back up and he gets strength again to serve God and to speak for God. And you think, great, he's on a path upwards again. But the derision again weighs into his heart, because look at verse 14. Cursed be the day wherein I was born. Let not the day wherein my mother bare me be blessed. Cursed be the man who brought tidings to my father, saying, a man-child is born unto thee, making him very glad. And let that man be as the cities which the Lord overthrew and repented not, and let him hear the cry in the morning and the shouting at noontime, because he slew me not from the womb. He said, I wished I died in the womb. Such was the derision and the heartache that Jeremiah faced. Jesus knew these same feelings. Jeremiah is not experiencing anything that Jesus himself didn't go through. And when we walk these paths, we walk the paths of Jeremiah, and we walk the paths of Jesus. That's what it means to walk in his footsteps, because the footsteps of Jesus lead through some very low, dark valleys. It's not always on the mountainside in the green meadows basking in the warm sunlight. Sometimes following Jesus goes through dark times for no other reason than you're a Christian. And it's easier from strangers, but it's hard when it comes from family and close people. Jeremiah knew it. In fact, all the men of Anathoth, if you were to go back in the story of Jeremiah, all the men of Anathoth wanted to kill Jeremiah for his message and what he was saying. Do you know where Jeremiah was from? Anathoth. It was the men from his hometown, the people who he grew up with, whose families, his family would have had picnic lunches together with. Those men wanted to kill Jeremiah because of his stand for God. Jeremiah knows what it is to go through deep, dark valleys and have people close to you ridicule you for your faith in God. Jesus knew what it was as well. He knew the derision. Now go to Hebrews. We'll finish with Hebrews. Chapter number 13. Hebrews 11, it's Hebrews 13 where I want you to go. I'll read a verse there, but I want you to tell you about Hebrews 11 as you're turning. Moses is in Hebrews 11. It's the hall of faith, right? Moses is in there. What did Moses choose to do in the hall of faith? What does it say about Moses? Anybody know?
Choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin and disease.
Very good. You pass. You can go home early. Yes, Moses chose rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to suffer sin for a season. He chose to reject the king's palace to follow God and to suffer with the people of God. That's what it means to be a Christian. People are always trying to be a Christian in the palace. Moses said, I can't be in the palace. I must be with the people of God. And there he suffered the ridicule and the mocking and the derision. Just as Jeremiah, just as Jesus, just as John Bunyan, and just as we do today, though in our society probably less than some of these people. But look at Hebrews 13. Let me close with this. Hebrews 13. Verse 11 says this, "For the bodies of those beasts whose blood is brought into the sanctuary by the high priest for sin are burned without the camp." You can go back and read about that in Leviticus, about when they do the offering and they offer the blood and they do all those sacrifices. That carcass, that lamb, or what they are offered, that bullock, they would then take it outside the camp and they would burn it outside the camp, is what he's saying. He says it was taken outside the camp. They weren't allowed to do that inside the actual camp. It had to be done away and separate. Verse 12 says, "Wherefore Jesus also, that he might sanctify the people with his own blood, suffered without the gate." If you were to ever take a map of old Jerusalem and where the old wall is that Nehemiah rebuilt in the city of David, and you'll find Golgotha is outside the city walls. Remember that song actually that just came to my mind? The Irish song. What did you used to sing? Outside the city walls? Yeah, there's another one that says that anyway, it's off subject, random thoughts I should control.
Amazing grace shall always be my song of praise.
No, there's the one that says outside the city walls. Yeah, anyway. I don't know, anyway. I'll tell you what it is. It's Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. My God. Yeah, but anyway, sorry, that was a random thought. In that, he outside the city walls. He suffered outside the city walls. Now look at the next verse. So Jesus died outside of the city. That's not without significance, because the very verse 13 says, "Let us go forth therefore unto him without the camp, bearing his reproach." This is what Paul is saying to the Hebrews. He's saying, right, you have suffered, if you were to read the whole book of Hebrews, he says, you have suffered a lot by purely choosing to be a follower of Jesus Christ. He says, and now your very families, and if you were to read chapter 10, their very houses and their lives were put at stake simply being a follower of Jesus Christ. They had lost jobs, they had lost houses, and their families had been destroyed, and their family relationships had been broken because of simply following Jesus. And now he says to them, understand that Jesus also suffered without the camp. He was a derision and a mocking, and they mocked him on the cross. You can read about that all in Psalms, the prophecies of David being mocked and ridiculed that foreshadowed Jesus Christ. And now Paul is saying to these fledgling young new Christians, to these Hebrews, he's saying, I encourage you also to go outside the camp, identify with Jesus, bearing his reproach and bearing his shame. Take the ridicule and take the mockings. Let us go forth therefore unto him without the camp, bearing his reproach. It's what Moses did. He left the population, he left the popular, easy decision of the palace, and he went outside and suffered ridicule with the people of God. That's what it means to be a Christian in this world. We're not trying to be a friend of the world and be where the world says, oh, we love these people. Because if I read this Bible correct, the world is an enemy of God. They're never going to have that harmony there. We must make a decision to say, right, I'm going to stand for God in an ever-darkening world. Even when it comes from very close people who mock and ridicule and deride, it doesn't mean we mock back, because Jesus sets the example for us, and you can read about that in 1 Peter, when he says, when he was reviled, he reviled not again. He was as a lamb before the shearers. Suffer the reproach of Jesus. There will come a day, and there's a new city coming, and there'll be no all of the derision and the heartaches of being a Christian. It'll be easy in the New Jerusalem, but God has so decreed it that this side of eternity, to be a Christian, you are set yourself in opposition to the world in which we currently find ourselves. And Jesus faced the same opposition and the derision from his very close family. Jesus knew it. Jeremiah knew it. John Bunyan knew it. And the Hebrews knew it as here. And I say only this, end with this. Go forth therefore unto him without the camp, bearing his reproach. Don't let the derisions and the mockings and the ridicules and the laughter. Stand for Christ. Teenager, in your school, on your job, stand for Christ. Men, women, on the job, stand for Christ. In your families, stand for Christ. In the workforce, stand for Christ. Don't let the mocking and the ridicule. Stand for Christ. Go forth unto him. Josh, you want to come and lead us in a song in closing tonight?